This is the Hour of History podcast. Our world, anytime, any place. And now from the Hour of History studio in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, your Hour of History starts right now.
Hello, welcome to Hour of History, where it's our world, anytime, any place. I'm Stephen Bauman, and I'm with Mathias Fueling.
How you're gonna mispronounce my name?
No,
Fueling? Well, in German it would
Fueling.
be like Fueling.
Well, is it?
With the umlaut?
How do you pronounce? Oh, the umlaut.
Right, like
Fueling.
Yeah, and then like everyone in America doesn't know how the umlaut is, so they just add the e after it.
Yeah.
So it would be like Fueling.
How do you pronounce it?
Just fueling, like fueling your car.
Are you feeling pretty fueled up?
Sure, yeah. Soccer. It's World Cup. It's football.
Yeah.
It's Russia. Hell yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk about the 2018 World Cup. That's going to take place in Russia. Eventually, we're going to discuss if we should even watch it or not.
Can you watch it in America, or is that like a form of like heresy? Like in the Trump era, you could lose your citizenship, Steve, for watching the FIFA World Cup.
There could be a Twitter storm
you need to be,
of anger.
You need to be like mainlining bacon and deep fried butter and watching good old American boys, corn-fed boys from like Iowa give each other brain damage through hitting each other on the head.
Well, you can rest assured I will be watching that, but typically that starts in September.
No excuse.
No, but I have a unique opportunity because I'm teaching the history of global soccer this summer. Cool. So soccer is a good vehicle with which to look at political and cultural interactions. But for this World Cup, let's get some background. So the beast at the center of this monstrosity, the World Cup, one of the most watched sporting event in the world, is FIFA, Fédération Internationale de Football Association.
Totally family-friendly organization.
Yeah.
Zero problems ever associated with a monopolistic body which billions of dollars flow through.
Yeah. Well,
Sepp Blatter? Who's that?
No,
I've never heard of that guy.
We need to go back in time, though, because this is an organization that's 113 years old.
Yeah. Who established it?
Can you name any other organizations that are 113 years old?
The Pope.
The Pope, okay. The Catholic Church has survived.
The Catholic Church.
What else?
America.
Over America.
Okay, in terms of organizational bodies, I'm being maybe the Nobel Prize,
maybe, but
Pulitzer?
But all of these international organizations sort of come out of this moment of internationalism at the beginning of the 20th century. Like there was the movement of Esperanto to create,
and they tried to outlaw war, and that went really well.
Okay, yeah, you're being so negative.
I know, but yeah. So who established FIFA? Was it England?
No. Actually, so England has their own football association. The FA.
Of course they would.
They
have their own church. They can't. They broke away from Europe. They can't let any. They have to have everything for themselves.
If ever there was something English, it was that they were not going to get with France and Austria. No, these are the nations that get together to establish FIFA. Actually, it's a European organization. So Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany.
Gotcha.
So these continental European organizations get together. They form an international organization to sort of codify the rules and regulations of this sport.
Because everybody on the planet and their mom loves to play soccer.
Absolutely, and it really exploded in industrial Britain, in these coal mining towns. So we have that, and they established a tournament, the World Cup, the Coupe Mondiale, and they wanted to, first it's hosted, actually, the first World Cup is hosted in Uruguay, and in South America, and this is at a time when South America had a lot of money where they could pump into these organizations because they had the sort of...
Sounds suspiciously similar to today.
Exactly, and the Football Association, England, says we're not going to participate. They actually rejected invitations for the first two World Cups.
Was this because they were just being proud English?
Absolutely,
Englishmen?
Because they said we are the Football Association.
They didn't like. It's not like they were like, oh, these Uruguayans, we don't like these people.
And it was an issue of money as well, because back then it cost a lot of money to put these amateur athletes on.
That's true.
So it's not until around the 30s that FIFA becomes the premier organization. And it stayed so. And so we can trace almost, over 75 years of one organization dominating the world's most popular sport. It's a bureaucratic dictatorship.
The Illuminati of the sports world.
Absolutely. And so, yeah.
And so then there was like this major scandal, wasn't it?
2015,
where it was like all kinds of corruption and dirty money, and you could like, and countries were buying basically spots to get chosen for the World Cup, and then that was linked with all kinds of other shady stuff in the EU, and it just like looked really bad for FIFA. They lost a lot of credibility.
Yeah, and it's actually the Brooklyn. It was a court in Brooklyn that tried them, and almost everyone was found guilty, pleaded guilty. The man who was in charge from America's, he's dead now, you know. So like these are old white guys running.
But they're not never gonna get in like jail time, right? Because they can just like go hang out in like Switzerland or something, right?
Exactly. And a lot of the islands, it's funny because like the Cayman Island Federation was an important player in this.
Dirty money, Pentagon Papers, 1.0.
So this is like a sort of textbook corrupt organization, but these bids go way back. So like, for example, the upcoming bid for the 2026 World Cup is going to be very soon here. So there's already jostling. And the way the bids are done is there's voting members from states from the regions of FIFA. So FIFA has North America Federation, South America, and so on. And they get together and vote. So like right now for the 2026 World Cup, there's two factions. There's the North America World Cup, Canada, US, and Mexico co-hosts. And then there's the Morocco faction. And Morocco is getting a lot of support from federations in the Middle East, federations in Africa.
So all the Saudis are like, MBS is like, here's some money.
And
money.
UAE, yes. And so what happens is these...
OPEC is like, hell yeah.
Organizations have to submit bids to FIFA.
Steve has just handed me a packet of what a bid evaluation report looks like.
And this is the official
This one
submitted.
is for Russia, and this is like a small pamphlet. Actually, no, it's a large pamphlet of material.
50 pages where Russia basically assures FIFA that things are going to be okay.
That's not going to happen.
Just a cursory look, and Mathias has dismissed. Okay, so let's get to the matter then. So in 2009, Russia makes a bid. Russia actually wins the bid, and this is the less corrupt case because in the same day, 2022 is awarded to Qatar, and that's where the House of Cards falls. But let's talk about Russia.
Yeah.
So Mathias, you are America. Just side note, didn't even qualify for the World Cup, so it's less of an issue.
We're happy for it. We're better for it.
But the number 2 purchasers of tickets are Americans still. So talk to me, Mathias. If you're an American, would you go to this World Cup? You are an American.
Yeah. Would I go? I go. I don't know. If I had the money, sure. But at the same time, recognize that this is just a spectacle for like, the Russian leadership and Putin to kind of like masturbate to their own glory. Like that's what it is. Like,
but then why would you go?
Because it's cool, man. Because it's like, why do you go to the circus, right? I don't know.
I've never been to the circus.
Oh, Steve, you're missing out. Well,
what? So I can see a bear clap? You saw that Twitter video.
Yeah. Well, so I think, so it's interesting that they did the bid in 2009, but like, Putin, ever since coming to power in 2000, has been very much focused on kind of reestablishing, right, like Russian glory, Russian honor, make Russia great again type thing. And part of that, right, is sports. And if we remember during the Cold War, right, athletic competitions between the United States or between Western powers and the Soviet Union or other communist states was a very big deal. It was seen as like, the titanic clash of ideologies and ways of life and everything. And so and so in the 90s, right, when the Soviet Union collapsed and basically the Russian economy tanked worse than the Great Depression ever affected the United States, and you have like veterans of World War II like selling their war medals on the street, that's perceived obviously as a massive sort of, kick in the gut by many Russians and by the Russian leadership. And so they think that to reestablish their dignity and their sense of being a great nation is that they have to get back in the game of athletic competitions, winning at the Olympics, winning sports. And we know this was another big deal, right? How Putin was obsessed for a long time with making sure that they got the Winter Olympics at Sochi. But we all know now that the Sochi Olympics were kind of a disaster, right? The building of Sochi as infrastructure was totally corrupt. Billions of dollars disappeared. And now with the documentary that just won the Academy Award, Icarus, which you should all go watch on Netflix. We're sponsored by Netflix. They're paying us $8 million each to say this. But you should go watch it. Truly, it's a really good documentary showing how doping that was pervasive under the Soviets has carried over into the modern, Russian Federation. And so at Sochi, basically every Russian athlete was cheating and on some sort of performance-enhancing drug. And so the Russians, again, getting the World Cup is in line with this idea that Russians have, via their corrupt oligarchy, a ton of dark money that they can funnel into international organizations to sway them to get events in Russia, and then they can skim off the top by building infrastructure and the corruption, and then it makes also Russia seem great again.
Yeah, but at the same time, there are...
So if you want to support all that and have a good time in Russia, go to the World Cup.
But that's what you said, though, that there's still an appeal to go to a World Cup, even though you're supporting a terrible regime. So this is sort of like...
Okay, so maybe I wouldn't go. I would like to go to Russia just to hang out, but maybe not to actually go to FIFA.
Well, but see, this is the whole debate with Cuba. So our government says we can't go to Cuba because we're supporting the government. Well, guess what? Millions of Americans are going to go to the Russia World Cup. It's supporting the government in a huge way.
In a much bigger way, because all of this is going to be trumpeted from every Russian TV channel is look how awesome Russia is because of the World Cup.
And one thing that it also does is it gives Russia an automatic bid. So the World Cup is 32 teams. The only two people who get to go for free are the former champions. So the former champions get to go, and the host. And Russia, so although they're ranked 66 in the world right now, is going to get...
They're not very good.
They're not very good.
But I bet some of those athletes are definitely doping, for sure.
And it was sort of in South Korea. South Korea was also ranked very low when they hosted, and they found a way to win, interestingly enough. Yeah, so... But
sorry, air quotes, win.
Okay, but just a little background. When Mussolini hosted the second World Cup, sort of like...
when was that?
1934. Sort of like a precursor to his invasion of Ethiopia, precursor to the Olympics in Berlin.
In 36?
36. Yeah. And Mussolini...
See, there's a long history of chest beating around athletic events.
Absolutely. And the Italian team win the World Cup despite a far better Austrian team. The Uruguayan national team did not compete, and allegations of a bunch of Argentinians suddenly becoming Italians for the World Cup.
So do you think that'll happen with Russia, that they'll find some sort of shady way to win or to do well?
Well, let me just say this.
Or to sabotage.
The opening day on June 14th is in Moscow, Luzhniki Stadium, which hosted the 1980 Soviet Olympic Games.
And those were the Olympic Games that we America boycotted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is of too much significance.
Well, and I feel like that's not unintentional, right?
Not
I think Putin and the leadership recognize this history, and it's funny because I think most Americans probably don't know anything about the 1980 Olympics. I mean, I bet if you said has America ever boycotted an Olympics, I bet most Americans would be like, I have no idea.
Right.
Whereas, of course, lots of Russians would be like, hell yeah, I totally know. Yes, 1980, they humiliated us, they spat in our faces. So again, it's this thing of Putin taking on this kind of mantle of the savior of the Russian nation, where he can say look, they boycotted us in 1980, but guess what? I'm bringing the World Cup to you, right? So sort of, it's going to probably make him even more popular than he already is. And make Russians much more, feel great again.
But let me throw this one out at there.
And then maybe he'll invade the Baltics afterwards.
Russia, known for its typically harsh climate towards foreigners, is going to be hosting teams from Africa,
from everywhere,
South America, Asia.
Well, I think we shouldn't act as if Russia is this barbaric wasteland. Moscow is a big, multinational, ethnically diverse world city. There's millions and millions of people live there. It's not some hellscape, right? I think most people going to Moscow are not going to encounter any major difficulties, even if you're not white, for example.
See, I disagree.
I think you'll be fine.
I disagree entirely.
I think for the most part. I think also as well because most Russians and the Russian government is very much going to be minding its P's and Q's. dotting its I's, crossing its T's, reciting the alphabet backwards, right? Like, I think they're also going to be emphasizing that they need to project a good image. So I don't think it'll be dangerous to go.
I really don't think so. Well, I don't think...
I mean, I know you had a weird experience when you went to Russia. But...
No, but I don't think the Russian government and police force are that organized where they can be like, guys, tone down the racism.
Either it's gonna be, I guess, really successful, and it'll be like a really good kind of like Potemkin village like thing of like portraying how great and awesome and multicultural and tolerant Russia is. Or it's just gonna be a total disaster,
right?
Or it'll just be horrific. People get beaten up by street gangs. It'll just be nasty. There won't be any infrastructure. It could go both ways.
Well, so in Moscow, I think it'll be easier to pull off this. We're a metropolitan.
Because it's not Sochi. Like, they're not like having to build stuff from the ground up. And that was the big thing with Sochi, is that because they had to build everything so quickly and there was so much corruption surrounding the construction, is that like journalists did all these exposés of like, where they were staying in Sochi. Nothing was finished. Nowhere really had good water, right? Everything was just sort of half-assed.
Well, so guess what? Sochi hosting. Other host cities where they're building stadiums, Samara, Rostov-on-Don, Volgograd. So some of these are massive cities. Some are also cities that have faced their fair share, like Kazan, have faced their fair share of ethnic strife and alleged terrorism and things like that. These are not like, so Moscow is one example. St. Petersburg, we imagine these cities will be fine. They've hosted international football events before, but Rostov...
And plenty of Americans go study and still live in Russia. It's not as if like... It's not as if we're like at like some sort of like irreconcilable war yet.
No, not at this point yet. But I'm just talking about like general.
Okay. So if you were, say, a black person going to Russia,
yes,
probably you should think hard about that choice. I guess if we're going to be brutally honest, sure, that is something to take into account. But I think the Russian government, I think, is definitely going to have a very much a kind of self-interest in making sure that at least black soccer players, like black football players from around the world in multinational teams, are well taken care of, because they realize that there's a lot on the line for them.
But is that enough? Is that sort of thing enough assurance for the world? Like, you want to. But
at the same time, well, sure, but like, it would be. Let's not sort of totally vilify Russia, right? Like, if you were like hosting the World Cup in, say, like Atlanta, Georgia or something, right? And
which we did in 1994.
Yeah, but did we have that same conversation of like, oh my God, are these black teams from like Africa, are they going to like get in trouble, going to the American South, right? Which is like a notoriously, racially charged part of the country, right? So I feel like we shouldn't sort of make it sound as if, again, as I said earlier, that like going to Russia is somehow like some dangerous thing, even if you are like a non-white person, but in general, even if you are like a non-Russian, non-Slavic person. So I think it might be a little weird, but I doubt any major incident's going to happen, because they're very self-interested in portraying their country in a certain way.
Well, time will tell. I'm certainly on the other side.
What do you think it'll just be crawling with just like skinhead Russian football hooligans?
No, that's a thing that happens in Russia. Absolutely,
it happens everywhere in Europe.
No, it doesn't really happen. There's far less of that in, say, Marseille versus like in a place like France versus.
Are you sure?
Absolutely, far less. You can read accounts of players who have played both in Western Europe and places like Russia, where these soccer clubs, a lot of them are really strongholds for this skinhead culture.
They're
still
kind of like fascist paramilitaries.
In places like the United Kingdom, soccer has been so
commercialized,
bougied out that like people don't even go to games because it costs £25-30 for a ticket. Whereas in Russia, you can still get a relatively cheap ticket for league games. That might change with the World Cup. They might try to price Russians out.
I think they might do that.
Definitely. And again, this is not a smear on the Russian people. There's a lot of great Russian people, right? But the country has significant issues, and we should call attention to that. And these are the sort of things that FIFA as a governing body should do. But
FIFA doesn't care, because they probably got who knows how many millions of dollars from who knows what kinds
billions
or billions, even from what kind of shady sources that was funneled to them through Russian dark money.
So then what is the role of the spectator? We're supposed to go and we're supposed to...
I don't know.
And consuming through watching it on television, you're putting money into the pockets of the corrupt organizations. When you buy a jersey, even if you're buying a jersey for, say, Cote d'Ivoire or Nigeria, you're buying a Nike jersey who was indicted in 2015 for paying billions of dollars to get these rights.
I don't know. I think that's like an indicative problem of basically every mass organized sports organization organized organization. Right, because we have the same debate kind of in miniature in the United States about the role of the NCAA. We have the same problem, right, with the NFL, right, where really popular mass sports that started out as amateur, and they started out as like very, kind of mass, like grassroots, like it was like the working man, blue collar. That was the type of people and person that watched sports, that got into sports. That was what was initially like marketed to. And then it just exploded. Like football, for example. When did that get just insanely huge? Like 70s, 80s?
Even
right?
Before,
like maybe from like the mid 60s we can say. Because you can like see old games on YouTube and it's like, it's insane how the difference. And so then these organizations that were founded, who knows how many decades ago, maybe even 100 years ago, that were initially small, very, not pretentious organizations presiding over what's just sort of like a fun pastime, explode, by the late 20th century into these just giant monoliths in which they concentrate billions of dollars and control, people, like the attentions of hundreds of millions of people all over the world. And that then, of course, per our other convos that we're having all the time about like how global corruption has just become so pervasive, and how the real globalization is just, dirty money, that these organizations then become really ripe for corruption, and they also just become really ripe for not wanting to kill their cash cow. They don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. So I have this problem, right, when I watch with football, maybe not necessarily like American football, I should say. Not with soccer, but because I don't really watch soccer, but with American football, because we know now that American football is incredibly exploitative of the players. We know there's all kinds of rampant, like, kind of, abuse. We know that it causes brain damage over time. And we just know that it's just not a good system. And the NFL leadership doesn't want to do anything about it, because what can they do? If they try to change the game, they're going to get enormous blowback. We know that emphasizing heavy hits and big tackles is what people like to see. We like to see people jack each other up on the field, but that's what causes these players to like go crazy because of brain damage later. And so it's sort of this problem of like, can you still ethically watch this sport?
Yeah.
And I guess we can say something about like FIFA and soccer is sort of the archetypical, right, like every man's game, because all you need is a ball in an open space and anyone can play it. And so it started right as a working class sport. And now, you're right, it's become incredibly bougie, incredibly expensive, and here in America, right, it's definitely not the working man's sport. Soccer is like for the rich kids in the suburbs. And so I think just globally too, it's like, can you still watch the World Cup? Can you still enjoy that kind of process while still knowing that you're contributing to kind of this corruption on a massive scale?
But see, what I don't get is why you're absolutely right in your analysis, but like, why do people always look at these things and only critique sports? Like, the exploitation goes far beyond sports. Like, let me give you an example. So you can talk about an NCAA athlete not getting paid to play football and risking himself for brain damage.
He's getting a scholarship, Steve.
No, but let me give you another example.
Another
example. No, I'm in support of it. But look at doctors. So pre-med students have to work ridiculous shifts. They're doing physical and mental damage to themselves in order to become a doctor.
Yeah, but
you have to do the same thing, and guess what? You're not getting paid. You're paying tuition to go to school.
But doctors do a far greater social benefit than some pro athlete does.
Really? Is it not a social benefit to be happy to have a hero? You should see the kids that I taught in Brooklyn, the way they looked up to Steph Curry. It was like nothing could touch
them. I know. Pro athletes are definitely kind of like demigods.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, man. Maybe I'm going to take a more like austere
Protestant, Lutheran stance here. But I just think that sports at the end of the day, yeah, sure, they make you happy, but like lots of things make lots of people happy,
and lots of things are also corrosive and
and so like for me it's just like it's not a good argument to say, well, organized sports make people happy, so we shouldn't critique them, or we just have to kind of shrug our shoulders and just say that's life. And you're right when you use that example with the doctor, but it's like, but doctors, like, a pro athlete can't save people's lives. A pro athlete can do one thing really well, and that's play their sport. Well, and it is amazing to see that level of human achievement, no matter what the realm is. Right? There's something quite beautiful about watching an elite athlete, no matter the sport, and playing amazingly well. Right? Like right now, when you're seeing someone like LeBron James. Or what's the other guy who's like really crushing it right now in the NBA? He just like averaged like a triple double for 2 seasons, like whatever his name is. Like there is something amazing about that. Like just the sheer human excellence is beautiful to see. But like playing a basketball, beyond just bringing enjoyment to people, has zero net social benefit. A doctor can save lives. Like my sister's a doctor, so maybe I'm personally invested in this. But like she delivers babies all the time. Like she's actively involved in doing something that's good for society in terms of perpetuating it and saving people's lives and preventing human suffering. Well, so right? Now so like a pro athlete who just brings enjoyment to people, great, that's fine. But like, why does it? If that's the case, though, then there's plenty of things that can bring people enjoyment that don't require you to like pay tons of money and support corrupt organizations that are inherently vastly exploitative, and exploitative not in terms of like producing people that can then do things like deliver babies, but just do something like make an incredible shot from the free throw line.
Well, since we're talking about sports stopping suffering, we have to look back to the Christmas truce in World War I, when soldiers on both sides of trench warfare.
That happened the first year of the war. Do you know why? When everyone thought the war was going to end.
Do you know why no one talks about when sports stop suffering? Because we don't know that it's done it, because the suffering isn't there. Delivering a baby is a tangible thing. You see the result. But sports bringing nations together, bringing peoples together, sports, so sort of reversing and going the other side, sports might be something that brings, Africans better status in Russia because of the athletic performance, Jesse Owens, that sort of thing.
Sure, but like, the thing is but we can still critique these organizations that run these
Absolutely.
Sports. So, okay, sure, maybe, right, I guess I'm not saying, like, sure, maybe I personally don't really watch sports anymore because of the dilemmas, but, like, sure, keep watching sports, but at least we can, like, do something about FIFA. At least let's, like, go after these corrupt, dark money pools that are corrupting the process. Like, you can still enjoy soccer, but don't think that just because you say, well, people like soccer, so we can't do anything about FIFA. Like, that's just illogical.
So is it unfair then to equate if a Russian historian is wearing their Russia jersey and they watch Russia versus Saudi Arabia on June 14th in Moscow? Is it unfair to equate that with supporting Putin?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think there's going to be plenty of people that like really want to see the Russian team win in Russia that don't necessarily support Putin.
Uh-huh.
But it's still, I think, going to result no matter what in like increased popularity for Putin, because that's just how these things go.
Well, so that's sort of like...
So I don't know if it's a 1-to-1. I guess I would say not everyone who's going to wear a Russia jersey supports Putin, but you can... Most of the people, right? Like, it's not like what is it like in logic? It's like wearing the Russia jersey was like a sufficient. It's like a necessary but not sufficient cause for supporting Putin.
Yeah,
like everyone who supports Putin is going to be wearing a Russia jersey, but not every jersey player wearer is going to be supporting Putin.
Well, they might be tacitly supporting Putin. They might not be directly hoping to support him, but they are supporting him by providing support for the team. So ultimately, then you're saying it's a non-issue. You're going to watch the World. You don't watch.
I mean, I guess it is an issue, but you're over here where I just say, well, the solution is just don't watch sports because the governing bodies are so corrupt, and you like going on this whole silly rant about like the uplifting nature of the human spirit in sports.
No, I think it's good. I think regardless of how corrupt the regime is, the sport should go on. But you gotta like reform these things first, right? It's not enough to just like
be like, oh, the NFL leadership's really bad and they won't do anything, but like I'll still gonna watch like football.
Well,
like,
but see, so we're living in the age of boycott, and I think that's my problem with it. Okay, so you have a corrupt organization, and then people say, okay, well, we're not going to do this corrupt organization. Well, you know what? Every single organization is corrupt. That's our capitalist system.
Well, I mean, then you're just making an argument for which I'm not necessarily opposed to. It's like, well, then let's just like do something about capitalism, man. Like, let's do some systemic like problem solving over here.
And
right?
thus we're back to Cynthia.
Yeah. And thus vote for Cynthia Nixon.
No, well,
right. So like when you say that, I guess that's where I'm like, well, then that's just better. That's just further cause for saying we need to have broader systemic solutions which go at the heart of our understandings of free market capitalism.
Right. But
rather than just being like it's all bullshit, so just don't worry about it.
Well, I mean, we look back and we so this was a big issue after the poisoning. People were starting to say, well, should England, who actually qualified for the World Cup, should England boycott the World Cup? And the response was the head of the Football Association, England's organizing body, is the royal family, and so they said no royals are going to go to Russia and watch the game. So that was their boycott, rather than have the whole team boycott. And so, like, I think boycott is sort of the wrong response to this sort of thing. I agree. You should sort out FIFA's corruption in the first place so this kind of thing doesn't happen. But we look back at historical boycotts. So the U.S. boycotts the Russian Olympics in 1980, and then the Soviets boycott the U.S. Olympics in 1984 in Los Angeles. And neither of those boycotts solved anything, did they?
No, but they made people feel good morally.
What's funny too is you have to talk in boycotts about the athletes as well.
But at the same time, they take that risk playing their sport.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't know. I just am gonna say I have a hard time feeling bad for athletes if like their countries boycott. I'm just like, well, that's the breaks.
But do you think boycott is a meaningful?
I mean, no, it's not like a problem solver, but it does show moral disapproval. Right, like
it's
and I feel like the only way you can ever bring a problem necessarily to the fore is to show moral disapproval. Like if you don't, like you're saying now, like okay, sure, we need to do something about like reforming the NFL. Great, how do you do that? Like, how do you even like get the governing body or whatever the NFL, whatever the official, body? What's it called?
What
the NFL's like ruling body, or like Roger Goodell, what he runs. I don't know. Yeah. So if you want to reform it, like how do you do that? How do you even persuade the NFL leadership that you need to do something about whatever the hell's going on here?
Here's how.
And the way you do it, I guess, is most people is just like, I don't see really any other good ways. That you just need to get lots of people getting mad about it and not participating and watching it until it gets fixed, because the moneymaker is people's eyeballs. That's what gets people money. If no one watches your sport's gonna die.
Here's how we do it without boycott, where people can still enjoy the sport, is have rules and enforce them.
How do you get? But again, Steve, you're just sort of like, it's like chicken and egg thing. It's like, well, how do you get them to enforce the rules if they have no motivation to enforce them?
Well, you need honest people, I guess.
Well, how you get the again? So for
you have good kindergarten teachers.
I guess
that's
so.
How you get honest people.
Sure. We'll go that far back. But I guess right.
It's true.
Let's have good kindergarten teachers too. But I feel like boycotts can be useful. I mean, what about the Montgomery bus boycott? If we want to be polemical here about like social boycotts can affect change, even though like they are silly, and it is like depressing that we live in such like a capitalist world, or like such a commodified world, that the only way you can show like social discontent is by withholding your consumption.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There does something to be something kind of off about that. Like that shouldn't be how it works, but at least we know that it can work that way. And so for me, it's just like, I don't really watch football anymore, American football, because there's nothing I can do beyond that, right? I can't reform it. I can write a letter or call somebody, right? But like that's not going to do anything. The big thing I can do consistently is like not turn the TV on or like stream a thing and give them money for watching what I consider to be like a corrupt organization.
Right. And I think that's I applaud the consciousness of that.
And I recognize that like lots of people aren't going to do that because they love football way too much, and that's fine.
I applaud the consciousness of that decision. I think everyone should be conscious, and I'm not saying everyone has to be perfect, but that's a thoughtful thing you can do. If you don't want to support a corrupt organization, don't support it. right? But my thing is like I mean, how can we live in that way and not be hypocritical? Because are we not just supporting corrupt organizations no matter what we do?
I know, which is again systemic critiques we should be doing. But I feel like that's just not a good argument to be like, well, everyone's a hypocrite, so we can't critique these things. So like with FIFA, like in an ideal world, Russia shouldn't be hosting it for a whole laundry list of reasons, starting off with, right, that Russia has been interfering in the elections and hacking and basically committing kind of like what I would consider to be essentially acts of like terrorism. Mm-hmm. I feel like we should call it that, right? Spreading literal terror via internet, propaganda and psyops to get people to vote for a favorite candidate in all hosts of Western European and countries and in America. And then, of course, the poisonings of Alexander Litvinenko and Skripal, and then other very shady deaths, like the guy who founded Russia Today, RT, was found dead in his hotel room. And then Boris Berezovsky was found dead. Even though the police have no evidence, I find it very hard to believe he died of natural causes. Right. And then Guskov or Guskovsky or whatever, one of these other like sort of oligarchs went into exile, right? So it's like, we know that there's there's scores of people that have been assassinated by the Russian state abroad in the last like 20 years. And we know that they've been messing with elections. And we know that Russia and Russian oligarchs is like the primary site of vast organized crime and corruption, and like the hotbed of global oligarchy. So it's not a good thing that this is happening. I guess in a dream world, I would say that countries should boycott, at least to show disapproval, because the whole point of this is to make Russia seem like a normal country for Putin, right? Putin wants to do this because he wants to show the world, as we were talking earlier, right? Like you were like, should people be worried? Like the whole point of it is he wants people to not be worried, right? He wants to say like, we're a normal, upstanding country that can host big international events and we can be strong and stand on our own 2 feet. But if countries don't buy into that image of Russia, that's a real blow to him. I mean, it would really piss Putin off, obviously. But that would be something of a victory in the sense that it would at least it would show that the rest of the world has some sort of backbone. Right. Because if you do this, like we talked about earlier with Mussolini, right? You host the cup and then you're like, man, we're really badass. Let's go invade Ethiopia. Right? Like I feel like this is like, again, this is kind of this perennial thing of like, if you don't show some sort of like pushback against Russia, it's just further emboldens Putin and the leadership to think that we can do what we want because we have all this money. And because money makes the world go round, as long as we give the people bread and circuses and World Cup, we can do whatever the hell we want on the global stage.
And this is exactly why Putin's been so successful, because there is enormous amount of truth to that. No one's going to boycott this World Cup. The U.S. boycotted by bad playing.
He's really smart. He knows that the FIFA is football's so popular that it would be madness for people to boycott.
People can't boycott.
If your citizens would like revolt in a lot of countries around the world.
Absolutely.
If the government was like, well, we're not going to send a team, right? Argentina, good luck making that happen.
Yeah.
Or Brazil.
Talk about a corrupt organization.
Yeah. So that again, right, is just slimy. It's just sad.
It's sad, but it shows that at least, and so that's what we do on Hour of History, is we bring these issues to the forefront, so at least you know. I think the key, like you say, turning it off is not going to make a difference. I disagree. I think even the individual difference does ultimately make some difference.
So are you coming around to my side now, Steve?
No, I'm not playing. I'm playing both sides, and then I never let the audience know. So no, to tell you what my side is, absolutely I'm going to be watching the World Cup. I'm consciously going to be aware of the fact that I'm playing into the Putin parade. But one thing that I enjoy is soccer. I enjoy seeing people enjoy soccer, and I think the World Cup's a great event that brings people together despite the enormous amount of corruption. We saw the same thing in Brazil with these multi-billion-dollar stadiums right next to favelas, where people are living in utter squalor. And so yes, that is disgusting on a human level. It makes you feel terrible. It's like eating a bag of chips. It's really tasty, and then after you think...
Or eating a bag of chips in front of like a starving homeless man.
Which we do every day in Philadelphia, right? absolutely terrible homeless problem in Center City. And people, how guilty can we be? We can't just go around being sad and depressed all the time because we're supporting these terrible regimes. And at a certain point, we need to be happy for ourselves in order to change the world, I think.
Well, I think be depressed and still go out and be active and change things.
Be depressed and happy and
no, don't be happy. Just be depressed, and because you're depressed and pissed off, go out and change things to make the world better so you can be happy.
There is the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, the Nixon and the Cuomo, the Stephen and the Mathias approach here.
Yeah. So have good have good kindergarten teachers, vote for Cynthia Nixon, get the Republicans out of power, critique free market capitalism, and change the world.
Thanks for listening. This is Hour of History. It's our world, anytime, any place.
Also, the USA is going to win the world.